All right, so for this one, should be notes number 7 that we're looking at. We're graphing inequalities. The big difference on this one is we're not graphing uh, like we were doing the other day. This is not just on the number line. This is actually on the coordinate plane. So the graphing we were doing the other day was where we were doing just a straight number line. If we had x was less than 2, we went down here to the open circle at 2 and then graphed it on that way. So not that inequality graphing we're doing there. This is more on the number line. So now we actually have to draw a line, y equals mx plus b form, and go from there. Okay, so big thing we're going to do. Basically, it's 4 things you've got to kind of look at. The one thing we're going to do is this inequality you've got, you're going to rewrite it in y equals mx plus b form. Now, granted, when we do that, it's not going to be y equals, it's going to be y greater than or y less than or something like that. But we're going to rewrite it in the y equals mx plus b form just to make it easy to graph this thing. All right, second thing you're going to do, if it's not already there, is then, do like you would normally do, graph your line. Figure out what your y-intercept is, get your b value, plot it, get your slope, go up and over or down and over to get your next point on the line. But then there's where you got to pause for just a minute. Depending on what your inequality is, you've either got to use a dashed line or a solid line. So if it's less than equal to, or if it's less than or greater than, you're going dashed line. And if it's less than equal to or greater than equal to, then you're going solid line. And when we're graphing inequalities, here when we were doing this part, it's kind of the same thing, either open circle or closed circle based on, whether this thing was, if it was less than or greater than, it was open circle. If we put the bar underneath it, we made it a solid circle. Basically the same thing here, solid line, solid circle, open circle, dashed line kind of thing. Okay, so then you're going to draw your line. Might be solid, might be dashed, depending on which one you're going to do. And then the easy thing you're going to do for this one, to me, is when you shade these, and I know probably what they told you way back in, I think y'all may have done a little bit of shading in geometry. If not, it was back in Algebra 1, may have been in Algebra or pre-Algebra back in 8th grade. They probably told you when you were graphing these, and we'll do this in a second, that you had to pick a test point and plug it back in. We're not going to do that. We're going to find an easier way to do this. And when it's going to be really easy, because if it's greater than or greater than equal to, you're going to shade up. If it's less than or less than equal to, you shade down. So we're not going to worry about this test point and plug it back in, which works, and that's the technical mathematical way to do it. But we're going to give you a shortcut so that you can do this thing a lot faster than having to do that. All right, so first thing we're going to do for this one, for number 1, we're going to go ahead and sketch this graph. We've got y is greater than or equal to negative 3x plus 4. So we're just going to write out the stuff that we need for this thing. So our slope is negative 3. Needs to be a fraction, so we'll put it over 1. Our b value is at positive 4, so that's where we're going to begin. And because it's y greater than or equal to, we're going to get 2 things from that. First thing is it's going to be a solid line. And because it's y greater usually goes up. So then we're going to shade up from the line. Okay, so we're going to kind of go back and do the opposite of what we're doing on our bell ringer. We're going to start at positive 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Put us up here. Our slope is negative 3 over 1, so we're going to go down 1, 2, 3 over 1. If you want to get another point, you can. But again, Math Excel, once you put 2 points, it's going to draw this thing in here. And usually the biggest mistake I make on these is I get in a hurry sometimes, and as soon as I do my 2 points, I'll go back and draw a straight line. If you're one of those weird people and you like to do your math in pen, then if you do that and it needs to be a dash line, you'll have to go back and then give me an arrow and say, hey, there should have been a dash line. That's, if you use a pencil, you erase it. It's no big deal. But if you're a pen user, then, you got to make corrections with it that way. So this thing's a solid line. So we got a line something like this. Okay, now the old way of doing this one, and if you want to do this, this is fine, but this is going to slow you down a little bit. The old way of doing this one that they probably told you was you pick a point that's not on the line, something that's easy, like 0, 0. And you take that point, you plug it back into the inequality, and you see if when I plug in that point, does it make this inequality true or false? Well, this would be 0 is greater than or equal to 0 plus 4. 0 is greater than or equal to 4. Is 0 greater than 4? No, so we don't shade this side of the line. We'd have to shade this side of the line, which you can do that. But again, you can graph this thing in 2 seconds. If it's y greater, we're going to shade up. So after you draw your line, you put your pen on the line and you draw an arrow in the up direction, and that lets you know you got to shade everything on this side. And there you go. And that works every time. And I remember we were doing this in Algebra 1 class one time, and we were doing the old way of picking a point and plugging it back in and checking it. And one of the kids asked me, he said, hey, I kind of noticed this when we were going through this thing. He said, every time it's y greater, I'm always shading up the y-axis. And he said, every time I'm less than, I'm always shading down the y-axis. And he's like, does that work? And I was like, I don't know. Let's see. So we threw like every problem we could figure out. We threw it on the board and it was like, no, this works. We can't find anything that makes this thing not work. So if you want to be the person that, if you want to go back and plug in the test point, you can, but shade up, shade down. I mean, it just start on the line and kind of go from there. Now, sometimes you get a line that's kind of weird, and they're like, well, how do I know which way is up? I'm like, well, you just put your pen on the line and draw it up, so there's always a trick question or two, and we'll kind of look at that one here in just a second. So, all right, so number 2, our slope is 3/5. Our b value is -5. It's y less than or equal to. So 2 things here, that's going to be a solid line. And because it's y less than, we're going to shade down. So we're going to start at -5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I'm going to put this right here. It's a positive slope, so we're going to go up 1, 2, 3, and over 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And again, I always have to kind of slow down here because this is usually where I mess up. I got to make sure it's a solid line. And again, because it's y less than, you just put your pen on the line and you shade down from that line. So no matter where you go on that line, you're going to shade down. So that's shading everything on this bottom part down here. Okay, so last test we had, which again, we'll make corrections on that today here in a little bit. Doing this one, this gives you the chance to kind of go back and practice. If you still are having a little bit of trouble with the graphing, we got some more of those today. We're just going to keep doing some more graphing, and we're just going to add in the shading part. But again, the shading hopefully should be easy because you're either shading up if it's greater, you're shading down if it's less than. All right, so number 3. Slope is -1. Again, for fraction, that's -1/1. B value is -5. And because it's y greater, it's going to make a dashed line. And then because it's y greater, we're going to shade up from the line. All right, so we're going to begin at -5. We're going to go down 1 over 1, which put us here. So that would give us a line that's going something like that. Oh, and I messed up, didn't I? I did, because I'm using a pen. There we go. I did exactly what I said I always do when I mess up on this one. Should have been a dashed line. So to fix that, I'm going to go back and do this. I'm going to do it in blue. There you go. So now, again, if this was a paper pencil test, this would be one of those things where you'd come back and tell me, that this thing is supposed to be dashed. Because, again, if you're using a pen, you can erase it, which is what I should have not been doing. But just trying to get it to show up better for the notes that we got. So, that, again, I did exactly what I said I always do when I mess these things up. I get in a big hurry when I draw my lines, and then I realize, oh, that's what's supposed to be that way. Okay, and then shading up, again, just anywhere you start, draw it straight up. So it's going to be everything over here. Now with Math Excel, after you draw your lines, and there's going to be, and we may do one of these here in a minute to make sure we got it. You've got the line that's here. There's a button as you're drawing. When you click on the straight line that's here, there's usually a button right beside it that's either it's like this, or it's like, I forget exactly how it is. I think maybe it's like this, or it's like this, where it's got dashes in between it. You click on one of those buttons to make it solid or dashed, and then there's a paint bucket that's tipped over that looks something kind of like that. And again, I'm a terrible artist, so don't hold me to this. But there's a paint bucket that looks like it's pouring out paint. Basically, you just click on that, and you either click this side of the line or this side of the line, and when you click on this side, it'll shade this thing in for you. Okay, number 4. Here's where we start getting a few little trick questions. We got y is greater than -4. It's only one letter, right? So we're only going one direction. We know we've got to be at -4 on the y-axis, which would put us here. All right, and then let's see if we can flash back to last week. We're going vertical or horizontal for this line? Horizontal. There you go. And again, now before we do that, make sure to do this correctly this time. This is a dash line because it's y greater, and then we're going to shade up. So if we shade up, we know it's everything up here. Go ahead and give number 5 and 6 a try. See what you can do. Now, preferably you got pencils, so if you make a mistake, you can go back and fix it real quick. If you don't, if you just want to lay a piece of paper over it and do it. Anyway, just give number 5 and 6 a try, see what you can do, and then we'll come back and check them real quick. Okay, so for this one, we start at -5. Slope is 2, so go up 2 over 1. And again, because it's y greater, it's a dash line. And because it's y greater, shade up, so it's basically everything over here. All right, number 6. This one may be messed up just a little bit because it's +2. You've got to go up 7 and over 4, which is off the mark, right? So it's way up here somewhere, so that's not going to work. So you're going to have to go backwards. Instead of going up 7 over 4, we're going to have to go down 7. 1, 2, and then over 1, 2, 3, 4 to the left. And that way it does line up with the point we're looking for there. Again, y greater than or equal to, so it's a solid line. And it's y greater, so that should be everything on the upside. Okay, so they should go that quick. If it's in y equals mx plus b form, it should be a pretty quick graph because, again, need your slope, your intercept where you're going to start, use your slope, and then just figure out if it's dashed or solid. Just try not to get in a hurry like I did with that one. And then figure out whether it's shading up or down. The only thing that you've got to kind of be a little bit careful of is, if you do one like number 7, flip over to the back here. It's x less than -5. So for that one, we're going to go to -5 on the x-axis. And if y equals horizontal, x would be a vertical line. Now, again, it's dashed. Okay, now here's the only thing with this one is there is no up or down, right? Because on this line, there's no way you can start here and draw up or down because this one's x less than, so nobody should be shading down, which doesn't really make any sense, right? Because there's no down from the vertical line. So in that case, you're going to have to kind of, instead of shading up, down like we did here, think about all the x values that are less than -5. So where are all the x values that's less than -5? Yeah, everything to the left. So now you're going to be shading a left-right. So now you're going to go that way. So if it's just x, it's actually a little bit easier because the arrow tells you which way to shade. If it's x less than, the arrow is pointing that way. So everything needs to be shaded that way. Okay. So that's about the only trick question you can get with those. But again, if that's one of those where if you stop and think about it, I think everything less than -5, well, then that's got to go everything to the left there. Okay. And then the ones at the bottom, we're not going to do number 8 because it's just a repeat of some of the other ones we've been doing. 9 and 10, for these, we'll do one or two of these because these are not in y equals mx plus b form. So the first thing you've got to do with these is rewrite it in y equals mx plus b form. Okay, so the first thing is we're going to subtract the 3x from both sides. So that would give you -2y less than -3x plus 10. And then when you divide everything by -2, you get your y. But again, because we're dividing both sides by a less than, just same thing we were doing the inequalities situation we were doing a couple of days ago. You're dividing everything by a negative number, so you've got to flip your inequality sign around now and make it greater. Negative over negative makes that a positive 3 over 2x. 10 divided by -2 would make that a -5. Okay, so there's the reason why we were going back and doing just the inequalities on a number line the other day, because that solving we did then, it's still got that same thing here when we're rewriting it, that if you divide everything by a negative number, you've got to flip that inequality sign around. So for this one, we're going to start at -5. And then we're going to go up 1, 2, 3, and over 2. I'm not going to get in a hurry this time because it's a dashed line. And against y greater, so we know we're going to be shading on the upside. So we're shading everything here. Okay. Number 10, basically the same thing on number 10. For this one, we would subtract the 5x from both sides. So it's going to leave us with -3y less than equal to -5x minus 15. Divide everything by -3. So it's going to leave us with y. And again, because we divided both sides by -3, I'm going to flip that around, make it y greater than equal to. That's going to be 5/3 x plus 5. So for this one, we're going to start at +5. And again, we're not able to go up 5 over 3 because it's off the graph. So we're going to go backwards instead of going up 5 and right 3. We're going to go down 5 and then left 1, 2, 3 to put us there. Bars underneath it on the bottom, so it's a solid line. It's now y greater, so we're going to shade up. So that's everything over on the side over here. Okay. And I think that's pretty much about the only things they can throw at you for this thing when you're doing the inequalities. Is again, it's just a matter of worst case scenario having to rewrite some of these and get them in y equals mx plus b form. And those, just be careful if your y value is negative, like both of these were, you're going to have to flip your inequality sign. If your y value is positive, you're not going to have to worry about flipping your inequality sign.